What's up, Redemption? How you doing? John Hendricks here, as always, for a brand new episode of the Threshing Floor podcast. And this episode, we are recording on the other side of Nationals 2022. And so we're going to be talking about all that experience was. I have my good friend Jayden Alstad, who actually won Type 1, so it kind of works out that we've got him here. And we're going to just be talking about our collective experience of Nationals and, what we experienced and kind of comparing that to previous Nationals and finding out, was it really the best Nationals ever? So if you want to know about our experience and know about things that happened at Nationals, this is the episode for you. As always, we're brought to you by Covenant Games. So make sure you go check those guys out and welcome aboard. Let's get going. All right, guys, welcome back to the Threshing Floor podcast. This is going to be episode number 39, and we're going to be talking about all that Nationals was. And I'm sitting here with someone that's been on the podcast quite a while. He also happened to be the player that brought home the title for Type 1-2 player. So obviously we'll talk about that. But how you doing, Jayden?
I'm doing all right, John. Thanks for having me on.
I will make one slight disclaimer is that we're recording this a lot later than we planned. We originally planned to record it Wednesday, but I came home into a cold, sinus infection, something that had my voice pretty raspy, and now I'm dealing with congestion. So if you hear a lot more mouth breathing than you normally do, I'm just going to go ahead and apologize up front for that. So we'll get that on the record here. You got any disclaimers you want to throw out there too, Jayden?
Well, yeah, I guess now that we're recording later, I'm currently dog sitting for my brother. So if you hear some dogs barking in the background, then that's what that is. It's not just John making weird noises.
Although most of them will probably be mine. So I guess let me ask you just straight up. You've had a few days now to sit and think about it and I guess recollect. I feel like I've gone through that a couple of times just on what all happened at Nationals and the experience of it. So how do you look back on it now? Do you rate it as, was that the best Nationals ever?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there was so much new stuff going on at this Nationals that I think it was probably my best Nationals ever, or my best experience wise, because I think there were more people that I was looking forward to seeing and hanging out with and chatting with, and I think that overall it was just after being creating content and getting closer with people that it's not just my brother's friends or people that I only sort of know, but I feel like over the last few years, even through Discord and through content creation and getting to talk to people more and more, even over the online methods, I guess, I think made this Nationals much better from a social aspect. And then of course all of the new stuff that was released that was really exciting, and then getting that Type 1-2 player title out of the way so I don't have to play Type 1 anymore. That was nice.
Oh man, you can't say it like that. You're gonna have to defend it next year.
We'll see.
So if it's on its own day, you're going to try to sneak into Type A, or you're just not going to play? Come on, man.
I could try to sneak into Type A if I just shave and maybe bring a helium tank with me or something. Should be fine.
Yeah, you will definitely have to do some shaving, and the helium's a good touch. To round out all of the titles, I guess you do need a Type A, right? Or do you don't have that, do you?
I don't think I don't think I ever won Type A. I think I I just graduated at one point because I didn't go to that many nationals before I was 12. Like I think it was in Minnesota in 2011, which was the year I turned 13. So I did not play Type A that year, I believe.
So to round out the career achievement, you're going to have to find a way to sneak into Type A. So next year would be a good time to do it. Chris is hosting, and you can get a lot of things by Chris.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I obviously only have the 1 year to compare it to last year, and I kind of feel bad when people ask me because they ask me directly, and so since it's only 2 years, it's a direct comparison. Last year, this year, instead of there's been 3 or 4 that I've been to, and then you can kind of just base it on. You just lump those together and you take the good of those and compare with the good of this one. But with it just being 2, it's a direct comparison. So I hate when I think about it like that because it's almost like I'm knocking last year's nationals, because last year's nationals was fun. It was fun getting to kind of meet some people for the first time and see what all that in like playing at nationals, having more than 4 rounds in a tournament, which, doesn't happen often in our play group and whatnot. So the longer Type 1 event, the longer booster, all of that, just getting used to kind of the setup of nationals, like the bones of it, how it operates, and then the, camaraderie of the community and stuff. It was pretty cool. But then you compare that to this year, and this year is, I feel like it was leaps and bounds better. But that's just because there was just so much engagement opportunity. There was so much engagement opportunity that I took all of my sound equipment. I even bought an extra microphone to record, a shotgun style mic to record some things so that background noise wouldn't be as much of an issue, to kind of cut through that, and didn't record a single thing for the podcast. Not a single thing. The first night we spent setting up the live streams and didn't get any side events in. I was hoping to at least try to get one in, and never played in a side event and never recorded anything. And there was a couple of times I could have recorded, but I didn't feel like I would be able to get enough content for what I was trying to record. Like if I got 1 or 2 stories from people about Roy, that's not enough to make a full podcast. So then it's kind of like, what do you do? You just don't worry about it, right? So
right. Yeah, I think that I guess that's kind of a good thing in the sense that like we were busy, having fun, socializing, catching up with people, and I did get 1 Iron Man game in, but yeah, other than that, it was just like either working on decks or just hanging out, and there were a few side events that went on, and we'll get to those, but. As far as like making content, some of the things that we were planning to do, we just didn't quite get to all of it, which is I think a statement of like how much there was going on at nationals.
So as far as how much engagement there was, what did you think about the overall layout of the event, like the schedule?
As far as like which events were on which days?
Yes.
Yes, I think that's probably the best way to do it. And now that the multiplayer categories aren't there, I think it's a more natural way to do it. I guess like splitting up, or I think having Type 2 and Type 1 separate is pretty good. I guess like just in previous nationals when they're together, you're missing out on a lot of the competition in both categories because Type 2 takes a lot away from the Type 1 competition, and Type 1 takes a little bit away from the Type 2 competition because I think that the people who are more competitive in Type 2 are more likely to play Type 2, but if they did play Type 1, they would still be competitive there, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, that makes sense because if you think about it, if they were on the same day, which I think is what happened last year, Type 1 and Type 2, same day for those main categories, Jeremy would probably play Type 1 and not play Type 2, and he won Type 2. And then if they were paired up, you would have played type 2 and not type 1, and you won type 1. So having them on different days allowed, more competition into the player pool, and then possibly led to the person winning that ended up winning that otherwise possibly wouldn't be in the category at all if they were paired together. So,
right. And I think that like part of the reason that they were put together was because there were the multiplayer categories, and so it was just harder to split them up. But then also there were, I think like they were just worried about like, if someone, winning both of them the same year, it's kind of like not giving other people a chance or something like that. I don't know. Where it's just like, well, if someone wins both of them in the same year, they probably deserve to win both of them in the same year. So I don't think that should be a reason to split them or to not split them up, I guess.
And I guess we can go through some results as we go in and talk about the categories that we each played and whatnot later on. Do you know that, I don't know how many people actually knew this. We knew this in our small circle, but Jeremy had what we thought was one of the main decks that should be at the top tables and have a chance to win each category that he played. If he had ended up winning type 1, he would have gotten the Nationals win and RNRS for both type 1, type 2, and then also did the same in teams. So he could have like clean swept RNRS points and the categories at Nationals based on his body of work throughout the year. So
that would have been pretty impressive.
It would have been very impressive. So part of the community is probably glad that didn't happen, just to break it up and have some different names at the top there. So that's what you stopped with your win in type 1. So
well, I feel like I didn't really do my part in stopping Jeremy, and I got to thank Zach Gilbaugh and Josh Potratz for that.
Yeah, it's a team effort. We get it. Oh man, I felt kind of bad after Jeremy lost to Josh or whatnot. Or I knew that. I don't know in the moment if I knew that he directly lost to him or that he wasn't going to win because of him. Is more what I knew. And I was like, man, I really shouldn't have loaned him those cards last night when he was asking to borrow some cards. I was like, sorry, Jeremy, I didn't know.
Oops. Well, if you hadn't, I probably would have. So it's all right.
Yeah, but then I wouldn't have felt guilty on the ride home. Speaking of ride, I guess we kind of just glossed over this. But how long was because you guys did the same thing that we did, kind of carpool and ride, took a minivan full of people. So how long was your ride in the van from where you are to Nationals?
I think we took about 5.5 hours to get there. So we stopped somewhere for lunch and took our time a little bit with that. We didn't want to, or didn't eat in the car, so we could stretch out a little bit. And then I think we made one other stop. Ended up being about 5.5 hours. So not too bad. We left Wednesday morning, and
that's child's play. So this is how our travel went. Me and Jeremy. I'll tell you from our perspective because I picked him up on the way from where I am in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to Knoxville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And Jeremy's kind of a couple of hours outside of Knoxville. He drove to a nearby exit so that I didn't have to do anything except for get off the interstate. And he got a ride there, and then I picked him up and carried him the rest of the way. So I left about 7:30, 8 o'clock, something like that, from Tuscaloosa to pick him
Wednesday morning?
On Tuesday morning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All
right. So on Tuesday morning, I guess that's important for this.
Yeah.
so Tuesday morning, and last year, me and Jeremy carpooled, and that was, I had a wreck and lost my beautiful Volkswagen that was paid off and all that, and I haven't bought a replacement car yet because I keep seeing these car payments, and I'm like, I really don't want to do that. But eventually I'll have to break down. But if I had that car again, or if I still had that car, then we probably would have just straight shotted it. Last year we did Texas. It was about 13 hours, one stop in the middle to refuel and use that as the one bathroom stop. And it was just straight shot. This time, we're carpooling with Chris Fashman and a group that he's put together in his van. So we go up to Knoxville, meet them, and so I get to the church about 1:30ish, I think. Tyler drives up from Georgia and meets us there. So there's Chris and Sean from his play group, Sean Sievers, and Tyler, me, and Jeremy. So that's 5 people. And so we get in his van, we park our vehicles at his house, and we head out to pick up our buddy Brian Jones in Kentucky. So we go that way, and it's a good little stretch between Knoxville and where we picked him up. So we picked him up in Kentucky, and I'm thinking this is probably around, I want to say it was almost, it wasn't quite dark yet. So maybe 6-ish, something like that. And then we pick him up, and now we're heading to Bedford, Indiana, which is where Andy Fish, the new owner of Your Turn Games, and his friend Brandon Swango, it's where they attend church, and we're going to sleep over, get a couple hours sleep at their church. They had some couches and whatnot that they said we could sleep, catch a few hours there, and then, kind of carpool in tandem with them. So they'll be in their own vehicle heading to nationals, and so now we have 2 vehicles. I
heard that Tyler did not get any sleep that night.
Did you hear that?
I did.
He said that me and Chris, because we're both snorers, we affected his dreams. He said he was having dreams about the sounds. But he also had a chance to go in a room where everyone that does not snore, like he even had the idea, well, how about the guys that snore sleep outside this room, like in the open, like gym? And okay, fine idea. And then he goes to sleep on the couch between, like, okay, that makes no sense. You had the idea, and then you still slept out there with the people that were snoring. And
I feel like if he got his perspective sounded different, or just like he thought that you were going to be sleeping wherever Chris was, and then like at some point you were asleep in a chair or something that was close to where he was. And he was like, oh, wait, like I thought he was going over there.
But he still slept by Chris. So he still chose to sleep by someone that snores.
Oh, okay.
But Brian Jones, he said that he was a super light sleeper. And I remembered that when I was going to sleep. And I was like, well, Chris is already out here snoring. Instead of being, kind of an annoyance to Brian and going in there and waking him up when I fall asleep, I'll just sleep in this chair here. Which... okay, and then Tyler was laying there, so whatever. Anyway, so we go and we get Brian, we get to the church, and I think we got to the church not too long before like midnight. And then of course everybody's talking, and we eat some dinner there that Andy's wife, I believe, had prepared, and so we ate, and then we were talking, just hanging out. And next thing you know, it's like 2 a.m. and I'm still trying to like put some touches on a Type 1 deck.
As one does.
Yes. And then everyone else was asleep. So I had to make that decision of like, I was going to go into that room where there was an open couch, and I was like, but Brian said he sleeps really light. So, I mean, I guess I kind of chose Brian's sleep over Tyler's because whatever. So sorry, Tyler.
He's fine. Yeah, he's got more experience recently than Brian, so he didn't need to sleep quite as much.
Yeah, we'll go with that. So we got up the next morning, and then we drove, and I think it was like 6.5-7 hours from there to Iowa, or North Liberty to be exact, to get to the venue. So we got there. I think we could check in at the hotel at either 3 or 4, and whatever time we could check in, we got there pretty much right at that time. So you're talking about from leaving at between 7 and 8 on Tuesday morning to arriving there Wednesday afternoon at hotel check-in time for all of that. But the amount of like fun and conversations inside the van, Like there's a certain rule, that what happens in the van has to stay in the van. But there's
Naturally, yeah.
there was a ton of things that we talked about that were awesome, and getting to know people on a deeper level than just interacting with them through the course of a tournament. Like when you're stuck in a van with someone for like 16 hours, whatever that is, like some things are going to come out. Some things are good and some things are bad.
Yep.
I will tell you, one of the conversations that dominated at least a good portion of our trip was I brought up the fact that the lines in the road, the dashed lines on the interstate, are 10 foot long, but when you look out your window, they look like they're 2 to 4 feet.
Was it 10 feet? I thought it was 6.
It's 10 by official regulations, federal regulations for federal highways. And then so we created this whole like argument or whatever, and we just kept going back and forth. And I was like, but look on that side of the road, like across the way, you could, when it was level and you could see, you've got the median, the grass median, but on the other side you see it and it looks 10 feet. So there was a couple of points where like we got to red lights or whatever in town to where we were like sliding the van door and yep, it looks about 10 feet. And Chris was like, those people think like just the absolute worst of like, what are these buffoons doing? And at one point we mentioned that someone should get out there and lay like somebody that's about 6 foot, like Brian, Brian, just hustle out there. He's not quite 6 feet, I don't think, but lay on this and see how close you are.
Yeah.
But
I've kind of wanted to do that.
We never got a chance to lay someone down beside it, but
I feel like the trick is just like, because you're normally looking at them in front of you, and so your perspective is warped, so they just look really small.
Yeah,
you just got to look out the side of the window when you're like passing them. It's quick, but you're like, oh, okay, that's like half the length of the car or whatever, and there you go.
Yeah. So we stopped at a rest stop at one point, and we stopped to eat. We stopped at a Steak and Shake. There was one right off the interstate, and we stopped there to eat. We didn't want to take a lot of time, but we also wanted to get out and stretch our legs. So it was between that or a Cracker Barrel, and we thought, you probably have a longer wait at Cracker Barrel. So we did the Steak and Shake, and Andy was like, so how's it going? How's the van ride? And I told him about the lines, and I don't know if he ever like carried that conversation to Brandon while they were in the van, but I just imagined like sadistically like them having the same conversations and arguing about it while they're riding. No, it's not 10 feet. No, it is. It's not. Just back and forth. And then I just wonder what it would look like when one of them stopped and got out and walked around the van and tried to measure it, eyeball it.
With those two guys, I feel like the conversation would be pretty fairly tame. They'd be like, oh yeah, maybe you're right about that. Like I feel like they're two pretty easygoing guys, whereas your van was like, you got some.
We've got the lightning bolts of personality. We've got some very strong personalities, and I don't know who has the strongest, but I see what you mean there. So that was one thing that we talked about. Another thing we talked about was like ranking like horror movie films and like the franchises. And then Tyler took that as to, who do you think would be the hardest for me to escape from? So like if he was going to escape from one of them, and he was like, if I'm going to escape from, who was it? The one that he says always walks really slow towards their prey. He's like, so all I've got to do is jog at a medium pace and I'm getting away. And like, who's the hardest to get away from? And like the ones he was talking about was Freddy, Jason, Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy, just random things. And one of the, I guess, franchises, even though I only think they did, well, I think they ended up adding a couple of films that really weren't that good, but the whole Final Destination thing, good luck, Tyler, outrunning death itself. Get away from that guy.
This is out of my wheelhouse, so I'm not too familiar, but I can imagine the conversation and the ways it would go. Our van was mostly, I mean, like we're all people who have known each other for many years. But I guess it was probably mostly like Bill and Nathan Voigt kind of getting caught up on some of the rules because I haven't played quite as much in the last few years because we haven't had many tournaments and that kind of stuff. And that, and then Bill and I having some kind of like theological conversations, and that causing him to miss a turn or two because he wasn't thinking about the directions. And so we were like, I got blamed for distracting the driver with one of our theological discussions.
Yeah, that sounds like something you would do. I'm going to go ahead and say it now. I agree with the rest of the van. You were guilty. Judgment shall be rendered.
I'll take it.
So when you guys got to, because I believe we met you guys, you had already checked into the hotel when we were checking in. So what were your initial thoughts about the hotel? Because I have some that are painted a little differently. How did you feel about the hotel when you first got there?
Well, so I mean, initially we were just thinking like, okay, let's get to the hotel, check in real quick. So like Bill just went in to check in, and then we drove over to the church because I was like, oh, I want to get over there to get everything like my stream stuff set up and whatever, so that we're ready for side events tonight and all that. And then we got to the church and we parked on the opposite side because I mean that's just kind of normally where we go when we're at tournaments and at Gabe's church, because it's not usually in the big like sanctuary. And so we were walking through the entire church, and we saw like a few of the like staff members and stuff, and didn't really get too many weird looks. But then we got to the sanctuary area, and we were like, wait, like where is everybody? Because like we were expecting everyone to just be like hanging out and stuff, and getting everything set up, because we saw the pictures from Roy in the Discord earlier that morning when the judges and stuff kind of getting things ready and set up. And so then we got there and we were like, I called John and I was like, so where are you guys? And he was like, oh, I'm out at some IV visiting some friends, and the church doesn't actually open until 8. And we were like, oh, okay, well I guess we didn't need to get here this early, but that's all right. So then we went back to the hotel, and that's when we were hanging out in the common area after we got all our stuff settled into the room, and that's when you arrived, and then that's where we caught up to you. And overall, like we had already kind of been made aware that the pool wasn't going to work, or wasn't it wasn't operational or whatever up to code, and so that was okay. But then we got there and found out that the elevator didn't work, and we were on the 3rd floor. It was like, okay, well, it's kind of annoying, especially because the stairway doesn't have air conditioning. And like other than that, we didn't have too many other problems. Like the key cards took a couple tries sometimes, but that's normal hotel stuff.
Yeah, well, kind of in there is kind of the basis for my statement. I'm going to go ahead and say it, that the Sleep Inn Hotel, I believe the address was 485. Hold on. I've got my receipt. I've got my
whole Yelp review.
485 Madison Avenue North, North Liberty, Iowa, 52317. Phone number 319-665-2700. That Sleep Inn hates fat people. I just want to go ahead on record and say that hotel hates fat people, and I'll give you a few reasons. 3rd floor, when there were still rooms on the 2nd floor, they gave us a 3rd floor room. You mentioned the stairwells, that it's not just that they had no air conditioning, because that's understandable. There was no airflow at all. So it's literally like you push that door to walk into the stairwell and you get hit with this wave of like just thick, like humid heat. And so the elevator was messed up. Also, the first morning that we were there, they didn't even have breakfast show up. The people that were supposed to show up and cook the breakfast or provide that didn't show up. But our room had the air conditioner on, and it was on low cool, I believe. and it felt like it was 100 degrees in there. And I was like, okay, you can't have a broken elevator. You can't have like us being on the third floor having to walk up here. And when I walk into the room, get hit with a heat wave because the air conditioner is not working. And so I turn it to max cool, and I'm like, maybe we'll just see. And having been in the car for 2 days, my first thing is I want to get a shower. So I go to get a shower, and the floor of the shower was so slick. And it's like, okay, well, I'll just grab the, there's not really a handle inside the shower. So I grabbed the shower rod. I was like, I'll just use this for stability. And it's about to fall out of the wall. Like the screws are barely in. And I'm like, this is just, I'm going to have to yell for Jeremy. Jeremy, I've fallen and I can't get up. And I was like,
please come extend your arm to stabilize me.
Yeah. But anyway, so I got my shower, got out, put on a clean shirt, went and sat down on the bed. And 5 minutes later, I had to change my shirt before we left because it was just drenched. That's how hot the room was. And I had been hot from, obviously, the steam in the shower and coming out. So I walked out of there. I was like, Jeremy, this hotel hates fat people, man. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. And then
in their defense, I'm pretty sure they had just been bought by, there was a new owner or something, and they were still figuring some things out, I guess. Or supposedly. I don't know.
Was the new
or they just hate fat people.
Was the new owner fat? Because if question. So, this is some fat on fat crime, and I'm not here for it. So anyway, we head down, and I carry all of my cards because all of my rotation cards fit in one box. It's a pretty bulky box, but I carry it down because when we go to the church or whatever, I wanted to have all of my cards accessible to potentially throw a deck together if I had time for a side event or something. That obviously didn't happen because we mentioned that we spent the entire allotment of time after the church opened setting up the streams and whatnot. But then Chris is like, and I'm going to go ahead and put this out on record here. I'm sorry, Chris. But Chris was like, we need to go get some food. So I think we should leave now because if Roy's group shows up, Roy's going to want to sit and talk, and then all the time for us getting food is going to be gone. So he was like, if we get caught by Roy, we're not getting food before the church opens. So we decided
doing some thinking ahead.
So he's like, I love Roy, but if we want food, we got to leave. And so I was like, all right, well, where are we going? And they're like, we're going to some food court or something. And then it turns out we're going to High V. Who you think put us on that?
Oh, definitely John.
But they actually had some really nice food. They had a couple of different restaurant options there. They had pizza. They had an hibachi style place. They had, I think one of them was like a salad place.
Yeah, they had a pretty good variety there.
Yeah, and then they had a Wahlburgers, but I didn't want to spend $40 on a burger, so I just stuck with that $8 pizza.
I think Tyler was like the only one who actually got something at Wahlburgers.
Yeah, so we all get there, and you want to know one of the funniest comments was they were asking where you guys were because Justin and was it you and Justin playing at the hotel when we left?
Were you guys playing? Jared and Justin were playing.
Oh, there you go.
I was finishing up my Type 2 deck.
Okay. All right. And they were like, well, it's probably going to be a while before those guys get here because Justin was involved in a game. And they were like, Justin, so that thing's headed for a 3-hour timeout.
Well, that and Jared was playing Resetti, which,
furthers the point.
Right. Yeah. Just going to.
But anyway, we got there and we ended up eating, and it was kind of a cool little spot to hang out in between, of checking into the hotel and then the church opening at 8. I met quite the character there because for the first time I was able to meet for the first time Daniel, and Daniel is a character. I'm not sure what kind of character, but he's definitely a character.
Yeah, he's a fun guy.
he is fun, and the way that he like words things before he gets to the point of what he's saying is quite hilarious. So
Gotta get him on here sometime.
yeah, I don't know if I got enough memory card for that, but got to meet
If you've
him.
got enough for John Early, then you probably got enough for him.
Yeah, and then Josh showed up with him, so we got to talk there, and therein is where Josh started his talk with Jeremy to figure out how to beat him. I'm just saying, Josh was putting in the research on day one there of how to circumvent the circus deck. So there you go.
That's kind of his MO. So
yeah, he's quite the undercover guy. He's like, just show me what you're playing.
yeah,
now I will beat it.
He's pretty open with what he plays. So then it kind of is like, well, if he's going to be open with that, then okay, fine. I'll kind of be open with it, and that's something that I find kind of funny. Just like at the high level of play that some of these players are at, where they're just like I don't know if it's just an openness about it, or if it's like a confidence of like, here's what I'm playing. Good luck trying to beat it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's more just the confidence of how they feel about themselves as players versus what they know the meta has been in the tournament season leading up to it. Like nothing's going to come out completely out of left field with as much sharing that we have going on with the community. So I'm sure that's part of it. And then it's kind of like, I think most people feel the way, well, I mean, I don't know if you feel that way, but I assume you probably do, that when you won Type 1, it's not because you had the best deck, but you had a good enough deck, and then you're just a solid player piloting that deck and knowing it well. So I think somewhere in there to where like their ability as a player and just having an adequate deck, you don't have to have quote unquote the deck.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I don't think my deck was the best deck out there, and I actually, speaking of kind of the things not coming out of left field, Jeremy's deck actually did kind of come out of left field a little bit for me. Like I had heard that he had something different, I guess, than like the typical Widow build, but I didn't really know much about it other than that. And so, it's possible that if I had known, that our game might have gone slightly differently, because I might have recognized, that I could play Christian Martyr on his Father Abraham, and he wouldn't have had another hero to play Numerous on. And so that might have changed things a bit. I think he still would have gotten there. So I think he had another way to play Delivered or something like that to go to Denarius and be able to draw. But, just that kind of thing, at least, for me was relevant to like not knowing exactly what he was doing before the game. So there are cases in which that definitely does make a difference. I do really like Jeremy's deck and think that he probably found the best version of Widow. But after watching the game with between him and Josh, you can also see how it can fall apart.
Yeah, you said it kind of came out of left field for you. I played in the entire tournament season in left field, apparently. So I saw the deck, unfortunately, a few different times and saw it kind of progress to what it ended up being. And every time he made any changes, it just seemed like it got stronger and stronger. And so if you're really talking about, and this is something that we talked about on the van ride, and Jeremy would never say anything that would come across arrogant in any way. That's just not who he is as a person.
Right. Yeah.
But like what I told you, he had the chance to potentially clean sweep every category he played in RNRS and the tournament at Nationals. We were talking about who would be the best active player right now and kind of how it's, you don't have anybody that's just clear cut absolutely they're the top one, because last year you did great at nationals, but then Josh also did great coming back into play, kind of later in the season, and finding a way to weight the coin flip into, I almost said corn flip, which kind of makes sense. Kind of makes sense. Texas. Yeah, but corn's on the brain. The state flower of Iowa. Yeah. But weight the coin flip against Love at First Sight in his favor, to where he was still able to do well against other deck types and won Type 1 last year. That's a pretty good showing. And then he shows up this year, wins Booster with Phase 2 coming out, and then turns around and is one game away from winning Type 1 again in back-to-back years. And we talk about how important it was for like the perceived legacy from the outside for John, because he was able to win back-to-back. I mean, Josh was right there on the cusp of that. So you got Josh in that conversation, but like Jeremy would never put himself in that conversation, to the point to where no one on the van, even though knowing that was an option for Jeremy, when we were talking about best players, didn't really even mention Jeremy. But mostly, like, I didn't want to harp on it too much, because I didn't want to make him, make him feel uncomfortable or whatever, talking about that type of thing.
Get his face red and everything.
Yeah. But definitely, could you imagine though, if he had won that, then you have to say he's probably the best active player if he had swept nationals like that. But then it's also the fact that the last 2 years, the combo style deck that has gotten to nationals as the best version of that deck, both times Jeremy Chambers is piloting it. So if another combo comes out that's broken, we just have to assume that the best version of that is going to come from Jeremy somehow. To know to put like the numerous as the stars, with the defense having stars and whatnot. And it's like these stars don't even matter, until like it's teams against the Alstads, and it does matter. We'll talk about that later, but it's like just putting. Yeah, I think we might have to. It's my one shot to fame here.
All right.
But just able to take an idea of a deck, and at first it was just a raw speed of Widow. Okay, Widow helps you deck out, and at first it was, I'm going to throw down the Cross and Golden Calf and these counters, and then JD started playing again, and in the Lucky Grand Prix, he's like, okay, once you deck out, you can do this Invoking Terror thing, and then they limit it to 4. So then you adjust your deck to that. The Invoking Terror play isn't quite as strong anymore, because you don't get to just loop it infinitely. But all of those changes, and just at the top of the list of decks after every one of those changes was Jeremy's deck, and just to the point to where when it got to nationals, like that was, I'll say that I believe that was probably the most refined deck that involved Widow. But even if you were able to get away from Widow, like that deck could still do some damage because of the numerous as the stars play, but also adding in the reset for if it gets behind or has lost momentum, to be able to reset with 3 nails. Like that was a pretty cool deck. And I ended up playing at the Southeast regionals, so I get the benefit of getting to go to 2 regionals, because I drive up to Tennessee for East Central regionals, so I get potentially 2 state tournaments at least and 2 regionals before nationals, which is nice. But I played Jeremy with your Patriarch's piece of Resetti deck. Literally just the exact list, no changes. And I played Jeremy, and it was the greatest game I've ever played. Really? It was so fun. At one point, Tyler's walking around doing his whole getting ready for nationals judging thing, and after a couple of rounds of turns, like I take a turn, he takes a turn, then Tyler's just standing there observing our game, and no matter what happens with anybody else.
Putting you guys on the clock, I'm sure.
I don't know about a clock. I don't think anybody had said anything about a clock at this point. But this game included, I reset twice, both with a new beginning and with 3 nails. He reset with 3 nails. I did an awesome mayhem play, so it's kind of like another reset, because he didn't have anything in territory except for like maybe one hero or something. So resetting his hand was kind of a reset to him. And it just went down to the wire. And at the end, I made a misplay that cost me because I probably had the win if I did it the other way after we talked through it afterwards. But at the end, I needed to get a blocker, and he had searched and drawn. And so I go crouch choice into Firefoxes. I had Leviathan in the deck, so I should have gone to Leviathan to grab Fire from Heaven from the reserve to have a negate big body character that probably gets a block there. But he can also grab an animal, so I could have grabbed Firefoxes for next round. And I ended up having an enhancement for the next block, but I didn't have a body to play it on. And he ended up just walking in for the last soul and ended up winning 5-4.
Huh.
But, I mean, there was this one play to where... and see, it's been so long since because I didn't want to out anything about Jeremy's deck. So I didn't talk about it, but I really wanted to talk about it on the podcast like that next day because just it was such a great game.
I would have known. Yeah.
Yeah, then you would have known. So I'm sorry.
I mean, I think that you doing that well against the deck that Jeremy had been refining for a while with a deck that was relatively new to you. I think goes to show that. I mean, with Rossetti being kind of a more technical deck, or like it's difficult to play, then the game being that close, I think definitely says something about the power of being able to get those resets and being able to time it well. Like Jared, I think did he end up placing 7th?
I think he was. I think he was at the top tables there at the end, and I think he ended up falling down because of losing to. He lost to you at the end.
Yeah. He lost to me in the last round, and I think that was.
And that was because he was just. I think Tyler mentioned this, that he just in his head he was stuck on the fact that you must have mayhem, and so he kind of played around that. But you ended up having Vain Philosophy, which kind of had a nice resurgence this tournament season. Vain Philosophy is so good.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think he ended up falling down. But had he found a way to tie or whatever, I think he was right around.
If he had beaten me, he definitely would have placed.
Yeah, but I think even with a tie, I think he would have had a shot at third or fourth. I think is what someone else. Everybody talks about every scenario after a round. They're like, well, if I had done this or done that, then I would place here and all of that. But Jared had a really good showing at Nationals for it being his first Nationals, and that guy's going to be a pretty good player.
Oh yeah.
But in the game with Jeremy, back to that, he also impartial judgment my hand. He hit me with impartial judgment. He ended up getting put in a tight spot after one reset to where he did Widow with only Meet Noah down. So
just to draw 4.
Just to do draw 4. So just making him burn some of those resources before the reset. And so I kind of took that into the deck that I played at Nationals, but I didn't add Soul Gen, which was a problem. I should have had the other Melchizedek in reserve instead of the Protect Lost Souls one. I should have had the one that generates a soul. Or I should have put Chariot of Fire in as, a tech, just because I have all these prophets out, and I could have rescued any of those, because not having Soul Gen ended up hurting me so much in just about every game at Nationals. But against Jeremy, the coolest play I had against Jeremy was I put unsuccessful. I had it in my hand, and I was like, all right, because you know how you built the deck. It's got the animals or whatever, and I was playing just your straight version before any changes at this point.
Right.
I was like, I've got unsuccessful, but I've already lost my Emperor Nero. I got to get to Colosseum Lion to be able to play this. That's a lot to set up, so I'm just going to activate unsuccessful as a negate the last, and I did it as an artifact. And then he went numerous as a stars for 6, and he lays it down so proudly. And he starts to search, and I was like, I'm actually going to discard this to negate the last. And so he had to put them back, and that stalled him almost completely.
I bet, yeah.
And And so taking out numerous and lowering the effects of, or the benefits of Widow in that game, man, it was so awesome. And
Yeah, unsuccessful as an artifact is kind of underrated. Like, I mean, it's such a good enhancement that it feels bad to activate as an artifact, but
yeah,
if it makes sense to activate as an artifact, don't be afraid to do it.
yeah, and I think a deck that actually can use 2 of the place negate last enhancement, so that you're almost forcing the opponent to have Chronicles to get rid of them, or multiple answers for them, so that, you know what I mean. So once one's placed, they have an answer for it. It's a lot harder to have an answer for 2 of them.
Right.
And it seems like there's a couple of different decks that could, with the amount of splashing now and the amount of those cards that have been created, that you could have that down, and just getting it off one time can completely stall a deck strategy.
Yeah.
So,
and fewer people are even playing Chronicles these days now.
yeah.
Like, let's see, we got the so the list that Gabe posted, the top 8 card count, and yeah, Chronicles was in 2 of the top 8 decks.
Yeah.
So those place enhancements pretty good.
I've got 3 or 4 copies, and I don't think I played it, but maybe like in one tournament this year. It's just there's a lot better options for helping boost your deck strategy, or to help ensure a quick answer against a certain play that you know is going to happen, like Vain Philosophy, being able to get rid of something that they just searched for, make them waste the resource to search for it. They go New Covenant to Emmaus Road, you let them go ahead and grab Delivered or something, so they burn that, and then before they can play Delivered, Vain Philosophy, just to
right.
So now that they've put the Emmaus Road back in their deck, and now you put Delivered there, they've already used their artifact slot. That's a lot of I guess attrition for that turn and that prep phase for them to work through before being able to get some more traction. And Chronicles has this weird way for me, like, I just want to throw it down and stop someone's prep phase, to the point to where I don't play it very well a lot of times, because you can keep it and make it a battle negate, and it's great that way. It really is fantastic that way. But it's kind of hard to do that when you know that if you time it right and you guess right, and they're going into a big prep phase, you can force them to do all of that in their discard phase before they get a rescue, and now you're throwing off the tempo of the game, especially if you're able to reset in the, like on your turn, reset after they burn some resources. But it's so hard to actually play it that way and it be effective that way. You might hit it like 1 out of 20 times where you play it in prep phase and it actually matters.
Right.
Because otherwise they're like, well, I've got Foreign Wives and I'm going to activate Delivered on Foreign Wives. Of course you are.
Yeah, it's just like, like at least in my deck, Chronicles was what got cut for Vain Philosophy, and just against like the combo kind of decks, or like the Widow decks. If Jeremy searches for Numerous as the Stars, and I have Vain Philosophy, I'm going to feel a lot better than if I had Chronicles, because I can play Chronicles and force it into do it in his discard phase. But I could also just play Vain Philosophy and make it so that he
doesn't do it at
this
all.
turn at all.
Yeah.
And so even if I did have Vain Philosophy in our game, if I did have Vain Philosophy in our game, then it would have made a big difference. If I had Chronicles, it would have made probably no difference at all, because he might not have been able to rescue on the first turn, but he was very in control of the game already, where like my shot to win would have been that, and then also looking into drawing my Son of God and Second Coming.
Yeah. So you'd have to have some pretty solid luck in addition to the right card in your hand already. So I guess let's talk about so you won a category, I won a category. Jeremy won every other category.
Yeah.
Turns out if your name starts with J and you play Redemption, you're going to be pretty good, kid. Just hold on. Because Booster was won by a guy named Josh Patratz. And then Type 2, if we go in the order of schedule, was won by Jeremy Chambers. You won Type 1, Jayden. I believe Willow Isbell won Type A, so no J there. So,
But in defense of the J's, I don't think there were any J's in Type A. So
okay, so you remove them and then you don't have to worry about it. But then in sealed deck, Josh Knitt won, and then John, myself, and Jeremy Chambers won in teams. So, which
J's have it.
and you know, had you guys ended up winning, you would have been double J's as a team as well, winning. So, it just seems like if your name starts with J, even if you're not very good at Redemption right now, just hold on, your day's coming. You know, like
I
I'm
wonder
not.
if it has to do with all of the J names in the Bible. Like, it seems like every third name starts with a J in the Bible, so maybe that's like, just continues through that.
Yeah, until some random guy shows up and he's like, "Hi, I'm Ehud and I play Redemption. I've just got this dagger and this deck that I'm going to win with."
Yeah, and this angel under the oak and all that.
So, I guess when I mentioned that we win categories, so we got a copy of the winter promos. So you got foil King of Tyrus, foil Treacherous Land, foil Humble Lost Soul for winning Type 1. What do you think about those cards? How good do they look?
They look really good. If I had a nitpick, like there's a tiny little border on the left and bottom sides that's like just gray, I guess, or kind of like straight foiling or whatever.
Where it's like off center from the printer.
Right. Yep. And then also, I think that the foil has a tendency to like scratch more easily. Like you got to be pretty careful with these.
Yeah,
at least
definitely.
like the one that John had in his case up there. KOT had a like scratch along his bicep that I think definitely takes the price down on that one a little bit.
That's just where he injected the steroid needle.
That's true. It was probably just a scar from combat. Michael's sword probably is to blame, but I think they look awesome though. I'm curious to see like how foils will progress, or like where they'll be used next year, and if they'll be able to kind of refine the printing process to make them all centered and whatnot. Like, I mean, they look great, no complaints whatsoever, especially for the like first time going through.
Yeah.
But if they're I'm also excited to see how they can improve over time, and how they'll be used. Maybe like it'd be cool to have like a foil card in like each set or something like that, or like a the promo kind of cards, or like box toppers as they say, or as they do in like Magic and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, or potentially like the plus version of the ultra rares or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I was able to obviously get them from winning teams and then RNRS in teams. So I have a couple of each of them, and there are some spots, and I was nervous about putting them in the sleeve because Gabe had showed me some of the test ones that he done. And he mentioned that they do scratch easily, and you can see the wear from where they've been, like shuffled through and looked at and whatnot. And he said that the printer mentioned to him that even Magic the Gathering foil cards scratch, which we know that that's not really the case, or at least not without malice intent. Like Pokemon cards, and I mentioned this to Gabe when we were talking about it, is they have like the texture that you can kind of feel versus just being like a painted layer so to speak.
Right.
So like it's kind of like built into the card a little bit more, or ingrained into it a little bit better, to where it offers more resistance to scratching. But I was nervous about putting them in sleeves for the first time, because I didn't want like the edge of the sleeve to catch them and do a scratch after. I never saw the one that John had in his box that had the big scratch, but I heard about it, and everyone was like, so if you get one, put it in the sleeve and don't touch it, because they scratch like super easy. And I was like so nervous about it. Like the whole ride home, I was like, where's my deck box that had my promos? I was like, don't let that get moved around too much. Because they actually rode home in my deck box with my team's deck without any sleeves on them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I was super nervous. You could say that I was a fool, but we kind of left in a hurry like that, and having to pack so many additional items from people. Like I ordered more sound equipment that got delivered to Gabe's house to use for nationals that we use for live streaming on Rob's setup. And
the 40 pounds of plaques that you guys had to bring back.
Oh yeah, you really liked the picture of the band, didn't you?
I thought that was pretty good, yeah. Especially with that big belt. Yeah.
Brian was right there at the end. If he could have beaten Josh Knit at the end, he possibly gets first place there, but he would have gotten first place in R&RS there. So he potentially could have added 2 more plaques there, and just our van would have cleaned up even more so than it did. But
his name didn't start with the J, so
yeah. So he was almost there, but not quite. That's because his last name starts with J, not his first name.
Oh, sure,
next year he's going to be going by like his first name or something. I don't know what it's like. I don't know if he's got a different first name or something, but he's going to be like, my name's John Brian Jones. I'm here to win.
Yep. There you go.
Just to add a little bit more flair to it. But I did really appreciate the foil and them going through the effort to try to make the promos pop and look good and just add another element to them. But I was super, super nervous about the fact that they scratch easily. So I'm eventually going to get some inner sleeves and put those in inner sleeves. And I don't know if I'll actually ever play with them. Since I have the 2, I could put one, as, for my collection of Nats winners promos, and then have one that's a played copy.
Right.
But
yeah, I think that's like, that was definitely one of the things that I was thinking about, is like, okay, do I actually want to use these? Because like they, like other promos and stuff, like the full art ones and the previous Nats promos, like I don't really have any problem actually like using those. But these ones, I was like, well, I'm kind of worried about like taking them in and out of sleeves. But yeah, maybe just doing an inner sleeve, and then if I ever do want to use it in a deck, then I'll just have to have inner sleeves on the whole deck, which is probably for the best anyway. Probably order some of those ones that Jared found recently that he said fit pretty well. So
yeah, that was what I was thinking. Order some of those, also just to keep them from potentially curling, since they're a foil based card.
Right.
I don't know how much they'll do, since it seems like a lot of the foil is kind of painted on, since it scratches off, versus like the card having a layer of that foil as like the top layer of it. I don't know how much that affects the, tendency for it to warp or whatnot.
It's interesting. That definitely could make a difference.
I know like the reverse hollow Pokemon cards that my kid opens every now and then, because he likes to collect Pokemon cards. I know if you leave those like out to where they can dry out, I guess they just get dry and curl up. But again, that's like, it feels more like that's more of the card material versus being painted on or inked on, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
I will say, looking through Gabe's test cards, first of all, the Noah looked fantastic. It looked awesome. But the cards that had the blue hue to them looked the best, I think. Like there was a Harvest Time in there that had the the blue edge. It was full art. It looked really good.
Ooh, I don't think I saw that one.
John's Gabriel Ultra Rare
Yeah.
Plus that was blue looked fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't hear, I didn't see it, but I did hear that your Star of Bethlehem looks really good in person.
That's right. I was gonna. We talked about that at one point, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll show you." And then I don't think I ever did.
Yeah, so
Did have it with me. But
I passed my opportunity to see that one in person. So I guess when you come to Alabama State tournament next year, since you already promised, you can't, no take backs.
that's right. We did say that, didn't we?
We did.
Wasn't there some kind of condition on that? Like, or,
I don't know.
I guess we'll have to listen back.
Yeah. I believe that was episode 37 where we
Somebody will
talked
tell
about
us.
that. Yeah. So the ones with the blue, and I did at one point in the van, I told them, I was like, no matter what, guys, the thing that I want to leave nationals with the most, and like I still had a chance for teams, like going into it, I had a chance to win teams, RNRS, or the tournament itself, to get promos and get the King of Tyrus and all that. I was like, the one card I want to walk away with is an Ultra Rare Plus version of Gabriel. And all the winning that Jeremy had done, like up to that point, he's like, I haven't seen a Ultra Rare Plus laid out in the winter promos. And so there was one put up there the last day, and Jeremy ended up taking something else from the other row instead of, so I could get that one. I was like, you didn't have to do that, but if you did, I'm going to take it. Because we had talked about getting the extra Ultra Rare or the plaque for RNRS, because there was only one, even though we tied for RNRS. And he's like, I've got plenty of these, so you can just have the plaque. I was like, okay, that's a mild-mannered flex right there. Like, as mild-mannered as you can be. I've got plenty of these. So I was definitely glad to scoop up the Gabriel, because I think as far as cards in a set, I think that's my favorite card in a set, like artwork style. I think that's the best looking redemption card out of a set that's not a promo. Like I really like, I love the artwork, and it could be that, I've got the comic books and I've read the comic books now, and I've seen that artwork or whatever before. And then also the cool factor of, like, you see it, it's a wow factor. So
Yeah, it does look really nice. I think that and the Beelzebub Ultra Rare Plus are the two that I still need. That unfortunately did not open either of those in the box opening that Jared and I did last Thursday. So
I've got two of the Beelzebub Ultra Rare Pluses.
Ooh,
My one
I'd have
pack.
to talk after this. Yeah.
My one pack that Rob sold me of super packs, I also opened an Ultra Rare Plus of the Resurrection.
Ooh.
So I had a pretty good nationals as far as, racking up ultra rares and promos.
Yeah, you got some of your money's worth.
Well, some of my money's worth here. I guess we can mention that because you recently became the proud owner of a 2016 Son of God.
I did. Yeah.
That the word on the street is you did. I assume that's confirmed.
That completed my national promos collection.
Did you? Nice. Yep. I'm one card away after nationals because I had a certain sum of money that I put into one of the boxes of my microphone so that it would be tucked away. It was, money for spending that I was hoping to, all the boxes that I bought and things come out of that money. So I had kind of set it aside. I put it in an envelope. It was cash from the bank. And I also knew that I needed cash to register. And so when we got there that night at 8:00 and we started setting up, I started opening all of my equipment and taking it out of the boxes. And I came across that money and I was like, oh man, I've got one of these small, like half flip wallets. So I wasn't going to be able to hold an envelope of cash. I was like, John, do you mind? Because he had his stuff set up. I was like, do you mind holding on to this for me? And I should have known, giving that money to John, I was never going to see it again, because when I went to ask for it back, he just kept, yeah, I've got your card right here. And then he starts like showing me the 2016 Son of God. He's got in like the sealed inner sleeve. And he's like, all we got to do is just, shake hands on it. Just let me know. Let me know when you're ready. And the whole time, like I'm setting up, he just kept making these comments. And so I ended up never getting that money back and ending up with a 2016 Son of God and a couple of other promos that I needed. One of those being the 2016 Captain of the Host, and then also the 2018 Angel of the Lord with all of the lightning. So I only need one promo now to complete my collection, and that's the 2018 Son of God, the one with the blue, which would look good as a foil, by the way, because of the blue.
That would look pretty sweet, yeah.
But I'm one card away from finishing out the collection, and so then Chris even got involved, and he's like, "Dude, I don't know about the 2018 Angel of the Lord because you can find that later on, but this Captain and Son of God, I'm not letting you walk away without getting it." And Chris is like, "Because I know how much you want it. You talk about it all the time, and it's like you may never get another opportunity like this. Like they're right there, they're in great condition. You've already like money that doesn't affect my ability to pay for other things at Nationals. It was money I had set aside for extra spending." And he was like, I'm not going to tell you got to get the Angel of the Lord, but I'm not letting you walk away from these two. And I was like, all right, fine. And so I ended up giving him like all of that. Plus I owed him extra 50 when we were all done. And I was like, well, I'll have to go buy an ATM and get you some more money out. And so then we got back in and we were leaving and going back to the hotel, and the whole van is clowning me at this point because they're like, "Did you register?" I was like, "No." And they're like, "You do know you need cash for that." And I was like, "Crap, that's why I was bringing cash." I was like, I knew I needed that and for the food truck. I was like, that John Early, he really got me. But I'm happy to have gotten that close to completing the collection and just being one card away now. And, if anybody out there is listening and they've got a sweet deal on a blue 2018 Son of God, holla at your boy. But
maybe he'll let you on the podcast as well.
Yeah, I'll trade you a slot on the podcast for it. Has the podcast reached that kind of reach yet? That'd be nice if I can trade spots on the podcast for promos. Oh, you want a national promo? You want to be on the podcast? I need that King of Tyrus.
Next Nationals, you can float that by the winners after, when you try to do the podcast stuff.
You mean when I bring all my equipment and don't record? Like even Tyler, like kind of jabbed at me in his video. He was like, he was like, Hendricks is like 7 times. He's 0-7 for bringing equipment and not recording. And it was like, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
I had it easy. Most of my stuff was during the events.
Yeah, we did record one time at Chris's church, but there was just so much echo in an empty room that, like, when one person talked, it echoed and bled into the other mic where it was completely unusable recordings. So I ended up actually recording, but not getting to do it. So I ended up driving late, like leaving Chris's at 11 o'clock at night from a tournament, having a 5-hour trip. And, that maybe it was around 10 o'clock. I don't know. But I gained an hour going from because I go back to Central Time from Eastern Time. Right. So it's actually, I guess, about 4 hours, 4.5 in the vehicle, but you gain that hour on the clock so it doesn't feel as bad. But I ended up driving really late into the night and being super tired driving and, risking all that for recording that could not be used. And I was like, man, that's just my luck. The one time I do record, I still can't use it. But my heart is in the right place. Like I want to be able to do that. And maybe in the future, not having to take like the studio style microphones and being able to take like that shotgun mic that I bought, maybe using that to record. And just the soundboard and that and the stand. And now I'm carrying 3 items versus like 14,000 items. Because it looked like I was getting ready to open, like, I was getting ready, how John had his table set up selling cards. It looked like I was about to sell sound equipment. I'm opening things out of the box and setting them neatly there. It'd be $250 for that microphone. That's a good deal. You buy that one, I give you a cord for free. Start selling used audio equipment at Nationals.
I almost had to buy those headphones from you.
Oh, they're super nice. You want to know something funny? I think they're like $49.99, which is the quality of them is so much far above that price point.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So I got two sets of them. I was like, yeah, that's pretty solid.
better than the just like ear plug headphones I brought. So
Yeah. So I guess we can move on from the promo reviews. We just acknowledged that we both enjoyed. I think the consensus is that everyone enjoys the foil promos, but being hesitant about handling them and whatnot. So if you have won a bid with John Early and you're getting some, or if you're going to buy some in the future, just be aware to take special care, because I'd hate for somebody to spend a lot of money on one of those, because it does have the status of being a national promo. So it's going to have a higher price tag, and then get them and, feel like they lost some value because it gets scratched up the first time they try to put it in the sleeve. So
Right.
going on record just to say, be careful with those. They still look wonderful. They're beautiful looking cards. You just got to handle them really carefully.
Yeah, and if you're purchasing one from, especially if it's from someone that you haven't really traded with, or they don't have much trading notoriety or whatever, maybe just ask for a picture beforehand, and just to be safe.
Yeah, and that's one where you probably definitely want it to be sleeved and in a top loader in mailing,
Yeah,
just to
and
further avoid that.
Get that tracking number.
Yeah, any national promo you buy, you should probably get a tracking number. Speaking of, before we get off that subject and move to the next thing, which is starter decks, I ended up playing a couple of different people. Out of all the people I played at nationals, you and John McAlesian, if I said that right. If I didn't, there's so many people that say it differently, and I'm saying what it looks like it's spelled. Like some people say McAlesian, and
That's
I'm like,
what I normally say.
I'm pretty sure there's a C in it when I see it. Yeah. So I was just like, I don't know. I'm just gonna keep saying it until I get corrected. I haven't been corrected around him or from anyone in his inner circle. So McAlesian, I played him opening round of Type 1. I played him in teams, played Emmanuel in teams, and I played you in teams. And those were the only games of people, or no, I played Steve in Booster. And apart from that, everybody was a new opponent for me through all the categories I played, which was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And one guy, I played Brett in Type 1, and he also was one of the teams that we played that unfortunately, fell victim to the circus. But he was like, "Did you buy my Son of God and my Angel of the Lord?" I was like, "I don't know. Were they national winter promos?" Probably. And then there was someone else was like, you bought a card or two from me. And so like doing some of these transactions and whatnot, and having solid trade etiquette with people leads to more pleasant experience when you play somebody. Like if I had sat down and they were like, "Did you try to buy my Son of God? Did you tell me you would buy it and never send me money?" Like that's a more awkward conversation. So just make sure you work on building a good, strong reputation within the community for being someone that's easy to work with and whatnot, and make sure when you say something, your word means something. So just throw that out there.
It's good life advice,
Yeah.
Just even outside of trading and that kind of stuff. But
well, we try. So
yeah, we're a self-help podcast now.
anything to keep the content coming. I'm running out of ideas, guys. I gotta do something.
Yeah, if you need therapy after losing to Jeremy or something, we can work that in. Yeah.
I can't help you there. I still need the therapy sessions for it. So I guess that takes us to the starter decks, which is another high-end item that people were excited to see how they looked in person, because they're coming out on a new card face to where they don't have the white border. They're going to have more of the color that goes to the edge. So they're not borderless per se, but they're not full art either. They just don't have the white border. So the color, in essence, is just a thicker border on them. What did you think looking at them? Because I think these are fantastic looking starter decks, but upon just first purchase and looking through them, what were your initial thoughts?
So actually, I first saw them at North Central Regionals, because stayed the night at Gabe's the night before. And
of course,
in hand, and so he let us look through like we were each looking through one of the decks, and they, obviously, they look great. And I was not, or like, I was pretty excited to get my hands on some of them at nationals and just have a copy, even if they're going to change and they're going to, look different. Some of the abilities might not be there, or might be different. There might be a couple extra cards in the full final release, but these ones looked really sweet, and I think that it was really cool to be able to get a set of those, in addition to the new stuff from GOC.
Yeah, the starter decks looked fantastic, and then me and Rob M, who did some playtesting with those, did our first game with them on live stream, and it did not go so well. And I told you that you should delete that because of how bad it went. And I was like, it doesn't make the decks look good. And also the fact that like they were playing really like slowly and just very cumbersome. But it was also the fact that I didn't read through the cards, like having them in my hand, read through them before you were like, I've got them sleeved up. And John's like, play on the live stream. And I was like, no. And he was like, come on, do it. And I was like, okay, fine. So live stream, never read the cards in detail. Like we've seen them when they were spoiled, but not looking at all of the Philistines together and seeing how they work together and all of that. And then trying to go in and play a game. And it ended up not being a great experience. And then I was way more critical of them than I should have been. Because like Chris and Tyler worked on these a lot. And because I talked to them and I'm around them a lot. Like I was real casual with it. I was like, man, these things play just like IJ. It was like you look at their hand, you get a lot more hand knowledge, it feels like. But then you see that they have more negates than you, and you're like, all right, well, I've lost this battle. and I was like, it didn't play well. And they were like, well, how quickly did you get to your choose the blocker character? And I was like, well, it was literally the last card I drew in the deck. So I had already burned all the enhancements that went with the purple side of the heroes. And I wasn't aware of like how the, underdecking to kind of be able to win the attrition war. I just didn't know how the decks work very well. And so I feel like it led to me being a little bit more critical up front than I should have been, because I have since seen other people play games and they turned out great. I've played a game or two with them since then. In fact, I ended up telling you that we had to push the recording today because I broke them out with Keegan and played with him. And I ended up smoking him 5-1, which is not generally how those decks work, but he was drawing a lot of defense, and I got all the good enhancements before he did, and I ended up always having more enhancements than he did, and I had a dominant when he didn't have a dominant. After he gets rid of all of my evil characters, I get to go and add an evil character to battle and then discard all heroes in battle. It was pretty cool. A very eventful battle, that last battle. Like we played each like 3 or 4 enhancements. And then I ended up doing the dominant to discard one of the heroes in his territory to add a new blocker to battle, to then have initiative against a big band and discard all heroes in battle, knowing he didn't have a negate in hand. So a lot more engagement opportunity once you know how the decks operate and whatnot. I think. Yeah. And I think as far as a teaching tool, which is what people are really excited about these. I know I'm excited. Me and Brad are doing a small group, our life group, if you will, at church for trying to teach the game to some new people. Hopefully some people come out and do that. We're starting that on the 14th. So next Sunday afternoon will be our first one. And so we've got all the IJ extra cards that have come out with both phase 1 and phase 2 that I've collected. So we can put some IJ starter decks together. And then I also was able to buy a second copy because I want to keep one copy of the starter decks, unplayed and just keep them as a collector item. But I was able to buy a second set from someone that was reselling at Nationals. So I have, one set of the new starter decks to be able to play. So as far as a teaching tool and seeing the borders, how they match. So this brigade character, this brigade enhancements that go on that character look the same. I think that, especially for teaching younger players, are going to be almost kind of like a light bulb thing instantly when they see it. Now, I'm not a big fan of the idea that maybe, in the future, when cards come out in booster sets, that we would have certain borders, meaning certain brigades and things of that nature. I don't really like that idea, but as far as self-contained in the starter decks, I don't see an issue with that, and I really think it makes the learning curve that much easier when you see that this matches that, so you can play it on that without even having to check the icon box.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that being a step in the right direction. I think that's one of the things that, like, whenever I'm teaching a new player, they're like, okay, then what does the color around the border mean? And I'm just like, oh, yeah, nothing really. Like it. But now, like the starter decks, those borders being kind of like uniform for the brigade that they correspond to, and with the updated versions, it sounds like the brigades on the borders will match the brigade of the icon, I guess, the brigade of the card. The color of the border will match the brigade of the card, I guess is a better way to say it. So that will be very clear for people who are starting out, and I don't think it'll be that confusing for like once they get new cards that don't have matching borders to the brigades. Like, I think at that point they'll understand, okay, it's the brigades that need to match the border. Doesn't actually matter, but it does make it easier to soak in at first. And I only played one game with the starter deck so far. That was against Emmanuel, and that was a really fun game. It was pretty back and forth. We both got a block by just negating the hero that played a lost soul from our deck with that, with the evil character that just negates a hero. And so, I think like there's a lot of like all the abilities are pretty simple, but I think there's enough variety to make the games interesting. And even though the decks are balanced, like you said, the cards will come up differently. Like, you'll draw choose the blocker hero. I'll draw my, card advantage fortress. And, those will change the way that the game goes. And so, like, even though the decks are symmetrical, the games are still going to be different and interesting every time. And so I think that that's a really good design for the starter decks. And I'm excited to get teaching people with these.
Yeah, I think sealed is kind of the only thing there where people probably want a firsthand experience account of. And unfortunately, we can't give it because we both played teams. So I do know that from other people's experience with them in sealed, they worked out well to where it was mostly positive from people that played sealed. But the one thing that you did hear was the people that had the K deck that had the Egyptian defense. So that's the one that has David and then has the Egyptian defense, is when you crack open a Prophecy of Christ and you get Egyptian cards, you can't really just splash them in because the brigade change. Right. But then when people cracked open that LOC and they had the Philistines, it was like open season. All of that goes. And that's an unfortunate thing, that because we're testing them in an environment that's not what they're going to ultimately be designed for. Because talking to Tyler, it seems like they did announce the new set, and we'll kind of just let this lead into that. The new set is Israel's Rebellion, which is what happened after they were, delivered from Egypt, from being in bondage in Egypt, to where Moses, let my people go. You have that. They're delivered, but now they're in the wilderness before the promised land, and all of what happens there, where they rebel against God. That's where you end up getting, some worshiping idols, creating false gods, and all of that. So Israel's Rebellion is for this period, and that's the new set that was announced, that they gave a little bit more information on that. But unfortunately, I didn't remember all of that. So I remember hearing it, and it sounded really cool. But the point is that it's going to work almost like a block to where you have the starter deck and then Israel's rebellion, and then you'll have one more set that'll kind of finish up that story arc.
Yeah.
And then sealed deck with booster packs from those sets that work directly with the K&L starter decks or Israel's Deliverance starter decks is what the ultimate goal is. So that's the environment that they're creating those decks for, and not for people to be drafting or opening packs of Prophecy of Christ and Lineage of Christ to go with them. So even though it kind of created a slight imbalance in cards that you had available to you to put in your deck and work with what was already in there, it's an unfortunate thing of testing these cards and using this as a wider scale play testing, because it doesn't have the cards that are eventually, going to be designed and created to work with the starter decks in sealed deck. So the issue about the imbalance there is going to be solved when sealed deck happens and you have booster sets that are directly tied in with the starter decks. So I think that'll work itself out and actually create a better sealed deck experience overall.
Yeah. I will say though, with you're talking about the imbalance with like the Philistines versus the Egyptians, but I think there was also enough of an imbalance with the offenses where Prophecies of Christ, that was every other card in that set was green. And so the K deck got that as kind of an advantage, I think. And then LOC had white, it had purple, and it had black, and it had pale green. So it had two of the brigades in each deck as kind of the main brigades in the set. But then, I think the fact that opening LOC with the Philistines, that's going to match the set, or that's going to match the theme and the brigade. Then when you open Assyrians in LOC, then those match the brigade, but they don't match the theme, and so some of the cards won't work quite as well as their kind of counterparts in the Philistine deck. But all that said, I don't know what the actual statistics are yet, but I know towards the final rounds, the top, at least both of the players at the top, or all four players at the top two tables had K decks.
Yeah,
which was kind of strange, because you would think that the Philistines, the defense would have the advantage there, because also the LOC packs had starter deck cards, and so getting some of the Philistine spears, or there were some safs going around, which that's pretty good for starter deck level card. I mean, he's one of the better characters in the IJ starter decks, and so you kind of got some of that around as well. But for some reason, the K decks seem to be doing better than the L decks on the whole, which I think was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess that shows that the potential offensive boost that they got was enough to push past people opening the packs with the Philistine stuff to pair with that. But I know that because they used the people that were playing teams, a lot of us were, I guess, players that were adequate enough to help check decks for sealed to get that going. So we ended up helping check. They assigned us to a row to help check. I want to say most of the people that I saw, and I don't know if it was excitement about the decks by themselves, just the decks how they came and wanting to play them that way. But I don't remember a ton of cards being added that were outside of that. We're talking each deck, maybe 5 new cards going into it, and maybe an extra card or 2 in the reserve, because it starts out with a 4, and I saw some 6 or 7 card reserves when I was checking, but there wasn't a lot of. I think at least 2 of them were 1 card different, and that's it, 1 card or less. Right. I believe I saw one that literally there was no changes, just played it straight up. And I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah, like Rob M's deck, he I think added 2 or 3 cards is what he said on the boards, and he ended up taking second. So like the decks by themselves are pretty good, and yeah, I think that there probably was that element of like, people haven't played them yet, so they don't know which cards aren't necessarily going to be as helpful, and when you're opening packs, you only get a few of the new cards, and so maybe only 1 or 2 of them actually does fit your brigades, and I think also like the time was a limiting factor. Like you had 10 minutes to open your packs and build your decks, and so I think that there wasn't quite as much trading going on as there could have been. Um, and then also like, yeah, there just aren't any obvious choices of cards to swap out like there are in I and J, where you have like a couple of enhancements that aren't really all that good, or a couple characters that are meek, and like just if you have another character of the same brigade that has an ability, you might as well put that one in, because there's not really any meek synergy within the starter decks. It just happens to be characters without abilities.
Yeah. So all of that leads to kind of where you kind of want to see the statistics on those that were at the top with all of those K decks. How much did they change their deck, and what were the cards that they added to kind of overcome the potential? Because it seems like when I say that you're able to open LOC and get Philistine stuff black that matches your black defense, it seems like there should be a swing that goes that way, especially with the fact that LOC also potentially gives you some white that works with your heroes on in that deck. But seeing all the K decks kind of rise to the top, and when I played Keegan earlier today, I mentioned that I beat him 5-1. I'll give you one guess which deck I was using, and it's crazy because they're mirrored decks, but like there's got to be something that accounts for that a little bit to why K just seemed to rise to the top in sealed. And obviously that's kind of it's not a just direct research. It's not a, what is it? You have a constant and a variable usually that you're testing things.
Control.
Yeah. You don't have any control, because there wasn't a lot of people playing with just straight up decks because they had the potential to change things. So there's nothing really to compare it to, unless you just start looking at what cards were added and whatnot. And did the K decks, did they just boost their offense that much?
Yeah, I don't know. I was also playing the K deck when I played against Emmanuel, and I won that game. So
yeah, and the crazy game where I was more overly critical than I should have been against Rob, and like I got a couple of early blocks, but then he pulled away. He was like 4-2 on me, and I came back and won 5-4. I was using the K deck. So let us know if you've played the K deck and you've lost, because you might be the only one.
It's that Daniel, son of God. That's got to be what it is.
Dude. Yeah. Speaking of son of God, so I really like the Gustavi Dore art that's on the L deck, I believe it is, that has the darker image of Jesus, and it's like when he was in quote unquote purgatory or whatever. It looks like that's kind of what I take from the artwork. And so it's kind of him with his cross, that image, getting ready to ascend from death. That's kind of where I place that in my mind when I see the artwork, and I really like that. And I think honestly, if there's a chance to use that for legal games, it'll be the Son of God that I use forever now, probably, just because I really like it. Chris said that there might be a chance that if it doesn't change the wording, which Son of God won't change the wording, that it might be legal even if they change to potentially the artwork that Gabe mentioned, wanting to use like Baptism of Jesus and then the Lion of Judah one.
Oh,
those artworks.
Jeff Haney ones?
Yeah, the Jeff Haney art. Apparently that's possibly still in play. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but Chris said if it did happen, there's a really good chance that the Son of Gods that are in the test run of the starter decks would still be legal as well. But
Okay.
I don't know how that all looks, how it shakes out. But
Make those pretty rare then.
yes.
That'd be cool.
So we were sitting there playing with Keegan. He's like, oh, this Son of God is my favorite. Daddy, can I put this in my deck? And I was like, son, I've got one set that I want to be a collector's site. I'm going to keep together, which means that there's only one of this Son of God artwork. And he's like, but I like it. I was like, I know, son, so do I. And then, like, how do you reason with him? Like, no, you can't have it. Back off, kid.
Gotta buy another copy, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm not really looking forward to paying the advanced prices. I ended up getting the second deck that I bought at Nationals just to kind of say what the market was initially. I was the first one that I heard buy a second one from like a resale versus getting, directly from Rob at 25. And I paid double. I paid $50 for a second set, which I think is reasonable.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And what I would think that the market would kind of bear, at least in the early, and then, as they get played and like unplayed versions are really good quality versions become more rare. Maybe it goes up a little bit from there, but not much, I don't think. But I'm not really looking forward to buying another one, because also with the play group that we're trying to start at church, I'll probably just end up wanting to, okay, 50-50. I'll buy $200 worth more. Give me that way I have like 5 sets, and now we can have 5 games of the new starters going. Like, that's a slippery slope. Like, where do you stop and get off? And right. I think I just got to get off at the 1 before I'm like, we could have 10 players playing with the new starter decks.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I guess now you got to kind of cross your fingers that we don't get the Jeff Haney art for Keegan's sake so that he can get that same art for the Son of God.
Yeah, well,
maybe I like the Jeff Haney ones better. I don't know.
He probably would. The Lion of Judah one, I think, would be right up his alley. Yeah. But also in Booster Draft, releasing at Nationals was Phase 2 of Gospel of Christ, and I ended up playing Booster while you were playing Type 2. So I got to see them a little bit before you, but obviously you've now opened up a box as well, and I ended up buying 3 boxes at Nationals because 3 boxes is what I would buy if I was buying them through a retailer and pre-ordering or whatever, and I lucked up and got all 3 at Nationals.
There you go.
Rob had sold some, and then his table was kind of moving slow in the afternoon. I was like, you want to go ahead and open it up for a second box? And he's like, I was like, come on, man. And he's like, you know what? I like you. We'll do it. And I was like, and we can buy another super pack. And he's like, yeah, I guess I'll let you. And he had two super packs left from a box. And he's like, do you want me to open a new box for you to get one out that has a chance at an ultra rare? And I was like, shoot, yeah, I do. So Rob turned out to be a fantastic guy to deal with. And then right before he was leaving, he's like, I got a few more boxes. If you want the more you buy, the less I have to pack up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, let me get another box. So I got a 3rd box. So then I'm done with that. And I think the only card that I ended up not getting was Crown of Thorns. I think that's the only rare that I didn't get. And I got, out of my 3 boxes, I got one of each of the ultra rares. So nice. That's a nice spread there.
Yeah, I kind of wish I had thought to get a second box. I just like the day was so busy. Like after I got the first box at the boarding, I just didn't really think to go get the second one. And when I was opening the boxes with Jared, like I opened my box first, and then Jared started opening his box, and it kind of made me realize like how many cards that I didn't open that I wanted to get, and like how many cards there were that I wanted to have duplicates of for Type 2 and all that. And I was like, oh man, I really should have bought a second box, but
yeah,
guess I'll have to wait till the retailers get them.
In your defense, he started selling them on Type 1 day.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And Type 1 day, I was not busy with a lot of winning, and you were busy winning. So let's just say that's why. Like, honestly, I wasn't very thrilled about running into a bunch of versions of Widow and all of that. So until that night when we stayed at Andy's church in Indiana that I mentioned, and I stayed up working on making changes to that deck that you had built that I had played. Before that, I was not going to play Type 1. I was hoping that there would be some other people available for side events, and then it started to look like that really wasn't like the way the side events were going. There wasn't going to be a chance to do side events while Type 1 was going, so it was like either play Type 1, and I ended up using it as a chance. I played a few newer players and using it to like teach the game a little bit. Okay. Like I ended up playing, I believe his name is, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but from Colorado, the guy that does the Witness TikTok videos. Brent Johnston, I believe is his name. Him and his family were there. Super cool guy. And I ended up using that to, as a chance to show him, kind of the mechanics of the game a little bit better as we were playing and not really being super competitive. I did the same thing when I played Julio Negron, the guy from Wake 'em Up Ministries, Rob M's friend from New York. So I think that was a cool use of, if I'm not going to be super competitive and whatnot, at least use it to have a good experience with some players that are new to nationals.
Yeah, I think that's one of the awesome things about nationals is like when I tell people that I'm going to a national tournament for the card game I play, they're like, "Oh man, that's really cool! Like, how did you get there?" Or like, get to that point or something like that. And I'm just like, well, it's actually anyone can play, and like, there are definitely competitive players that, if there was a qualifying thing for nationals, that they would be the ones who are there. But then like the majority of the players who are playing at nationals are just there to have fun and play games, and they're not super concerned about winning. And I think that that's a great attitude to have, especially early on as you're kind of getting used to the game. And or if you're playing in a meta that's annoying and can be frustrating, like Widow, and like you don't want to play it, but you don't really know how to beat it, or things like that. And so I think that there's definitely still something to be said about going to nationals and just playing to have fun instead of worrying about winning every game. And I think that kind of as long as you kind of stay away from the upper tables there, then it's pretty easy to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is hard for me to reason and wrap my head around before like I got into games in Type 1 and started actually doing that, is that I'm such a competitive person that if I don't think I have a shot to do well and be competitive and work my way toward the top table, like it's kind of like, what's the point? And, sucking it up and playing and being able to share the experience with some newer players and whatnot, and, play players that I hadn't played before. Kind of, there's another side of that coin too, because if those guys don't have people that play them that are willing to have those experiences with them, do they have their best nationals experience, or do they just play a bunch of competitive players that, blow over them with 5-1, 5-2 wins, and, there's no real engagement outside of that. Game. So I was glad that I was able to at least use my, not being thrilled about playing Type 1 to maybe make it a better experience for other players that were playing it. And I ended up playing. No, when I played Brett, he was like, "Did you buy my Son of God, Angel of the Lord?" And that was the nicest thing he did to me that game, because he like bowled me over 5-0. Like I had no shot in that game. He was playing a musician's deck, and I came out and I had, in my opening hand, I go first, and I have Noah, who obviously can convert to Meek. I have Enosh and Golden Calf. Okay, so I'm going to drop Golden Calf. I'm going to put Enosh down, come in with Noah, convert, hope he doesn't have anything, walk in for a soul, and I've got a little lockdown for a very simple turn 1. And saving all my resources for after I reset. Mm-hmm. But then I ended up having, he ended up having Deceiver to kind of work around my my little rescue there, and I never had a chance after that. He got rid of my meek, so Enosh was turned off. He had woes in his first 3 to negate my calf, and that was all she wrote in that game. But I ended up playing Nathan Voigt, and he was a fantastic player, and we had a really good game. He was up like 4-2 at one point, but I did a couple of resets and came down to he just didn't get a soul for me at the end. Or no, yeah, at the end he didn't have a soul for me, so I ended up having to reset, and I come in with Noah, and he had drawn King of Tyrus that had the protect, so it was like whatever. But I mean, that was a fun game. So
yeah, I think that it's kind of cool. Like I've known you for a couple of years now, like, and just hearing you being like, yeah, I played against Nathan Voigt, and I'm like, oh, cool. It's like, people that I know kind of connecting, and like, it's, I think that just is another thing that goes to show like how fun nationals is. Like, now you get to meet this person that I know, and it's just kind of the whole like family reunion sort of thing, and getting to now talk with you about playing Brett, and how he's he's becoming a really good player, really solid player. And then actually, I don't know if he showed you like kind of his little like combo thing that he was trying to do in his deck, but I actually stole that for teams in the teams deck that Justin and I were playing, or at least the deck that I was playing. I kind of stole his combo, which I guess
was that the Noah play or the flood play? I mean,
yeah, the flood play. So that was something I was like, oh yeah, that seems pretty cool and kind of fun. So I, like as Justin and I were building our decks, and we were trying to figure out, I guess, how to stop the Widow shenanigans, like getting kind of the counters out during intro prep and all that. And then I was like, you know what, if they do go off, it would be kind of fun to have this combo in there, and just try to kind of turbo it out on turn 1 if they go off, and so I kind of built around that, and that was kind of fun. I could have played it against Emmanuel and John. Like I could have done it to
you could have, but you didn't feel like you should.
Well, I didn't need to at that point, and I was like, well, I was going to do it just for kicks and giggles, but I actually ended up messing up that rescue, because I was supposed to abandon my own woman with child as well to search for Second Coming, and then we would have gotten that rescue, and then I would have played Second Coming and that would have put us at 5. But I was holding Woman with Child in my hand, and so when I played Faith of Samuel, I was just like grabbing Emmanuel's and John's heroes, and then I grabbed the Daniel that Justin had taken from John, like in it was actually in intro prep. John had put down Daniel, and Justin activated Flying Scroll and took it, and we ended up getting I think like 2 of our rescues with Daniel and their whole offense, and so that was kind of funny. But I abandoned all the heroes on the table, and then I was like, I just completely forgot to abandon my woman with child, and didn't get that search, and then and then the whole thing with John at the end, and Justin played Mayhem, John drew Burial, Son of God, and Second Coming, so he was able to rescue 2 Lost Souls and bury he got to bury their 2 Meek Lost Souls and the Covet that they had, because before Justin played Mayhem, I played Grapes just to get it out of my hand so that I would be more likely to draw into my Second Coming.
Yeah.
And so I had played a good dominant that turn, and so Burial was able to underdeck another Lost Soul. And sure enough, I did draw into Crowd's Choice, which I would have been able to play to go, or to get Second Coming. But because Justin had played Mayhem, then John was next in turn order, so he got to play his dominance before I did.
Yeah.
And yep, that was so we won that one timeout 4-3.
You guys seem to have had some of the worst luck you could have had at the teams table.
Yeah, oh man.
And I really thought, because what's harder than beating an Alstad? It's beating two of them. And I have never played Justin, but I know I played you last year and John, and you guys whooped us. And like, I was so shell shocked by what you guys were doing that I didn't play a dominant when I should have. And you were like, after the game, you were like, yeah, I don't know why you didn't just go ahead and burn that dominant, because like it didn't end up mattering that I would have just at least created more resistance for you guys there.
Right.
You guys beat us.
Teams happens so quick that like if you have the opportunity to play a dominant, you probably should, because if you don't, then the game's going to be over before you have a chance to.
Being that was just my second time playing teams ever, and the first time was at a really informal, like regional, like there was just two teams playing. Mm-hmm. It wasn't super competitive, and it was just like, okay, this is how teams kind of works. Figuring out the intro prep, and then you guys with a full onslaught of like, we're going to do this, to where every decision we made basically killed us in the end. It was fantastic decks that you guys had built. So coming into teams this year, I was like, Jayden's going to be really tough if he plays, and then find out that you're playing with Justin as well. And I'm like, from all the way people talk about Justin, how good he used to be. And I mean, I'm sure he will be good again, but obviously not having played for a while, there's a lot of accumulative rust to kind of work through, get the old pistons pumping again. But when you guys sat down and you won the dice roll, I was like, oh no, we're getting beat, because Jeremy was set up to go first for us, and Justin wins, and he's like, I'll go first, which puts me going first. And I was like, out of me and Jeremy, and I was like, I don't know this deck that well, because it was just basically a straight copy of Circus. One of our decks had ability souls, and one of them had the first to kind of offset some of the speed bonus that the other deck had with some of the dominance and things. So I ended up going first, and I didn't feel good about it, and we ended up coming around. And anyway, it comes to the game is on the line. It's like 4-2. You guys are going in for the final rescue, and you guys picked our you took our Forsaken Lost Soul instead of our crowds, which ended up being, kind of a costly mistake, because it burned your High Priest plot on the next turn. And then you took away Forsaken, but Justin was banding with David, who has a CBN band. And I think Jeremy ended up playing Grapes on that battle. And we also shuffled with our double Jonas. Each of us had one. We shuffled your Storehouse. And we knew you were sitting on Angel of the Lord in your hand, and had no way around it. Like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to, whenever anybody tries to block you on your turn, it's game over. Mm-hmm. And then the top deck of like the Century, Emphatic Incriminators, which top decks a good dominant from each hand, and delivered. Yep. I told Tyler that story, and he's like, I'm surprised. Or he was like, shockingly, you didn't play those in the wrong order, did you? And I was like, really? You think I would do that? Let me discard the top card, and now I'm going to top deck.
The way that game was going, Jeremy might not have been surprised if you did.
Yeah, well, that same turn, like the turn right there, I also thought I cost us the game, because Jeremy's talking me through the deck. He's like, now do this, do that. And he's like, now play Widow. And I'm like, I don't have Widow. And he's like, how do you not have Widow? And I was like, because I don't play this deck. I don't know how. He
was so defeated.
Yeah, he knew for sure we had got beat at that point. And you had your Grapes of Wrath. So we ended up, I had Emperor Nero when you went in for your rescue. And so we were able to protect him from dominance, even though you had banded, I think, at that point. Mm-hmm. Right? Or was that? No, that was on the play with Justin's rescue. We were able to do Emperor Nero so that we could play Grapes. It protected him, even though he wasn't protected from the heroes, because it was lone. We were protected from dominance, to where dominant initiative got to Jeremy to play Grapes. And then on you had Grapes. After he went Malchus to Scribes to grab unsuccessful, you hit Grapes. And then he had another blocker, and I didn't think he had another blocker, but he comes out with like Foolish Shepherd and ends up being able to play unsuccessful.
Yeah, I think he had like 3 other blockers or something. He had Foreign Wives and Foolish Shepherd, and I think one other evil character. But yeah, either way, he definitely had enough to like get on the. He definitely had enough evil characters to where he was going to be able to play unsuccessful as long as I didn't have a character that could um, get initiative if I had a battle winner, which all I had was Faith of Samuel, and you guys had Wall of Protection, and so I wasn't going to be able to abandon anybody that would stop him from being able to play unsuccessful.
Just none of that happens without that crazy top deck luck there.
No.
But also, if you guys had taken our Crowd's Lost Soul to where you went to play your High Priest plot, and I let you, and this is something that I've learned the hard way, don't immediately tell somebody when something isn't going to work. So, because if you had played High Priest plot and I was like, hands protected, then you would have been like, well, I can negate that. So I let you go to reach for Jeremy's hand to clear your target, and I was like, we got Crowd still. And so it kind of fizzled that. And that ended up being a clutch play that helped us win there. But definitely the highlight of Nationals was, for me, being able to, when I thought that I cost us the game because I was going, Justin was going, and then me, and knowing that I didn't know the deck that well because I refused to play it all tournament season because I didn't want to be like that copycat thing from last year where I felt like I had to play Love at First Sight to have a chance to win tournaments. And then the whole Widow where he's like, no, play Widow, and I don't have it. I thought I cost us. But being able to do all that happening and us winning that game was fantastic.
So then in the third game, the third third item in this series of unfortunate events. So we were playing against Brett Ayler, who we talked about earlier, and then his teammate was Andrew Straight, something like that. Pretty close. Sorry, Andrew. So we were playing against them, and they're both pretty decent players, and they had I think mostly they're like type 1 decks. I think they just kind of synergize them for teams a little bit. I did actually play Andrew in type 1, so I'm not positive what he was playing, but Brett's deck looked pretty much the same. So anyways, it was a very slow and defensive game to the point where we're going back and forth, and I think we only got 2 rounds in. And in the last round, I was going in for what would be lost hole number 2. And I went with Elijah. I chose his Nimrod to block, knowing that he didn't have any evil cards in hand. And so then I had Faith of Samuel ready to go, just going to abandon some heroes and and call it a day. And Nimrod was prevented, so he couldn't play Shield or anything like that. So Andrew, he's got Falling Away, so he plays that on Elijah. I have Second Coming, so I play that to search my deck for Ride On Victoriously and add that. Tina, what are you doing? And play that to add my Noah to battle because he was meek. And so then Noah gets initiative against Nimrod, but before that completes, I guess, he got to draw 2 off the bottom with Treacherous Land because I played a dominant and I played another multi-brigade card in battle. And then off of that draw 2, Justin was able to use Priest of Zeus to negate or to discard Treacherous Land so that he wouldn't get any more draws. And so didn't have to worry about that for the rest of the battle, but he did get to draw 2 cards that I didn't know. I played Faith of Samuel. I banded in enough heroes to have big enough numbers, and then also Jeremiah to toss the next enhancement, just in case he did draw something. Sure enough, he tosses a Jonah's Anger and then plays a Balaam's Teaching. Those are the 2 cards that he drew off the bottom. And he got an enhancement to toss and then an enhancement to win the battle against a multi-hero band. So that was pretty disappointing. in my discard phase, then I was like, all right, well, it's the last round. I'm just gonna like I got confirmation that it was in fact the last round. I was the first player to go, and so each of the other guys was gonna have a turn. But I played Offering Your Son to grab Scapegoat from my reserve, and during the battle I had banded to David um, to search for Solomon's Dream so I could get Son of God. And so I played Son of God on Distressed, put down Scapegoat, made everyone skip their next battle phase because they were going to have two battle phases and we were going to have one. They only had one lost soul, and it was from Brett playing Son of God. So I was like, all right, the odds are pretty slim that he's going to have a way to search for Second Coming, and so it's a kind of in worst case scenario we tie if that does happen, which would be bad for us because we timed out against John and Emmanuel, and they did not. So, anyways, we get to Brett's turn. He's drawing his cards like one at a time, all dramatically. Does not find Second Coming. He finds Solomon's Dream, but doesn't have anybody to play it on. So he plays a few things on his turn. Then we go to Justin's turn. He does a few things, can't attack. So he pretty much just passes. We realized after the game that he should have gone to his reserve with Storehouse for lacking prophecy, but he didn't think to do that, so he didn't activate that, which, spoiler alert, will be important. We go to Andrew's turn. He, in his top three, draws Prosperity Lost Soul, which in teams, that's one of the majority of Lost Souls that trigger for both players because you have a shared land of bondage. If you need a refresher on teams, there's a podcast about that a few episodes ago. Anyways,
you probably should have reviewed that the way the story's going.
treacherous land is important, is good. That was one of the things in there. So Brett gets to activate Prosperity, and he discards a card from his hand, and sure enough, in his top two cards, draws the Second Coming. And this is out of like 30 cards left in his deck. Like, we've only gone through 2 rounds, so it hasn't been like a super fast, speeding through the deck kind of game. They weren't playing Widow or anything. And so it was just like, it was a really bad beat kind of a thing where it was just like he got the bottom decks with the bottom 2 cards and then the top decks with the top 2, and so they played Second Coming to get to Son of God. They rescued another one, tied us up at 2, and that was how we ended up in third place, and those guys got second place, which is awesome. Like, I mean, congrats to those guys because they're relatively newer players. I know I've played Brett. Like, I know he's kind of been a part of Gabe's play group for a few years at least. So, like, I mean, he's got some experience under his belt, but I'm glad to see them get the second place finish there, and even though it meant that Justin and I had to take third.
Yeah. Well, if it's any consolation for you, we beat those guys pretty good, which was fun for me because Brett, he's the one that I mentioned, beat me 5-0, and I never really had a shot. It was basically like, after my first turn, I'll shake your hand, you win type of game. But the funniest thing in that game was they got a hand look off of a star ability or something, and Andrew looked at Jeremy's hand, and he starts talking about what's in it, and he's like, so I guess they're playing Prophets and Sadducees, and Brett's just like, no, Andrew, they're not playing that. I'm pretty sure they're not playing that. And then when Jeremy goes, he just goes off, and it's like, no, they're not playing that.
Yeah.
So that was a funny little start to our game against them. But
that's kind of how I felt playing Jeremy when I got the hand look, and I was just like, what is going on with his deck? Like, he's got an Abraham, he's got a post-exilic hero, I think it was a Lyud. I was like, this is just kind of a weird combination of stuff, but I was pretty sure like he was playing Widow, so what's going on here?
Oh, Widow was in there. Trust me.
Yeah, I found out eventually.
Yeah. So I guess the way you found out would be over the course of your encounter with him in Type 1, which I guess earlier we mentioned Type 1, and I think people would be mad if I had this podcast, had you on, and you had just won Type 1, and we didn't ask you. Like, me and you both kind of mentioned about your deck not being the best and just being good enough, and you being a good enough player to make it, make up the difference. But neither one of us like clued the audience into what that deck was or anything. So people that don't already know don't know anything now. So I'll let you talk about your deck a little bit, and then we'll ask you some questions about getting out of your brother's shadow.
Oh no. All right. So yeah, I guess most people probably know, at least if you pay attention to my channel at all, you probably know that I was planning to go in playing post exilics. At least that offense, I was kind of waffling a little bit with the defense at Minnesota State and North Central Regionals. I played with a more hand control focused defense with the gray. I was like, oh, Pontius Pilate, he's super good, and then kind of mixing or like putting the hand control together with the offense and the defense. I think just was it was a good match for that offense. Plus the gray helped me fit Balaam's prophecy in more naturally. So then it was like a couple days before Nats, and I was doing some test draws with my deck, just kind of mostly working on like the timing part, and I was just kind of thinking like, man, I don't know that the gray is going to be quite good enough. Like, I think I need the whole herdsman package, so to speak, to be able to keep up with a first turn Matthew, or like a if someone does do a first turn intro, or not intro prep, just prep phase Widow. And I think that was probably the right call. I don't know. It actually, I don't know how much it really mattered that I had herdsman, because I don't think I ever got a first turn block with him, and I think I was only attacked by a first turn. No, I wasn't even attacked by a first turn Matthew in like the entire day, which was weird. Like, that was unexpected, but it was just kind of the way that the cards fell. Like, against Josh, I got the stricken. Jeremy wasn't running Matthew. Emmanuel made a misplay on his first turn, discarding his way to Matthew with prosperity. And so I didn't necessarily need it, even though I had access to it in the games where it might have come up. And so definitely would have made a difference there. But if I were to like play the games the exact same way, the gray defense probably would have done better overall. But anyways, I decided to go with the black Philistines. I still had a little bit of gray splash because I wanted to keep in Daenerys, so I had Nero in there, and I wanted to keep Balaam's prophecy for the draw of Jeshua. And then I wanted to keep Pontius Pilate in there, but he went into reserve along with Emperor Claudius. So I had like Clinging to Power to get out Claudius. I had Tenants Kill the Sun, and I had Stricken, which could both be played on, black or gray. So I figured that they, meshed together well enough. And I was pretty happy with the way that the defense ended up and the way it played. I think it, like Goliath it's a really good blocker right now. It has been for a while, but and then the offense, the two changes that I made since the big tournaments was just mostly like a cutting down on brigades and um, adding a little more resilience, I guess, to the deck. And so I cut out Zechariah the Renewer and Jeremiah Hopebringer for Jonah and Malachi. So Jonah to be another kind of like first turn counter if I can go first and get him down. Um, I had I had maybe not plenty, but a good number of counters like Golden Calf and Jonah that I think are, and pretty sure I was running Priest of Zeus, that all, help against the Widow setup and all that stuff. And so, it was kind of adding another layer there with Jonah, and then with Malachi, he's a post-exilic hero, so he fits pretty naturally in there. And then I had Haggai in as well, so another minor prophet, so that I can take star cards from discard pile, and then also I can top deck them if I only have Malachi, and then just draw them with Jeshua. So he works pretty well with Jeshua and the post-exilic offense as a whole. And so I figured that he would be good just for recurring for sacrifice and teaching in parables, since I wasn't doing the impartial judgment stuff. Impartial judgment was not in the deck. And so I thought that would be pretty good. He also recurred some defense. Like I think he recurred Stricken and Betrayal throughout the day. Which is pretty sweet too. He doesn't have to get good star cards. And then the last change I think that didn't really come up, but I think was probably the right call, was I swapped out, or Foreign Wives was in reserve. I swapped her out for Plague of Frogs, just so I could have another answer to Foreign Wives other than having the cross active and tossing Amazing Faith. Like that was pretty much the only answer I had, and Posty's got to have an answer for her because of Zerubbabel and his draw two. That's not optional if you want to convert him to Meek. And so I swapped Plague of Frogs in there just as like, okay, here's another thing that I can kind of surprise my opponent with when they try to get a Wives block. I wasn't blocked by Wives like the entire tournament, which I guess the other answer to Wives that Posties have is just doing the hand control stuff so that they don't have access to her. I don't think I was blocked by Wives the entire tournament, but I was ready in case I was. And looking at the top 8 card counts, or the card counts of the top 8 decks, I believe Foreign Wives, she was one of the 7s, and I was the one that wasn't running her. And so I guess in my mind that kind of justifies that as the right call for me. And plus she reduces the brigade count in my deck, even though I did have her in reserve. So anyway, that was pretty much what I was running. I do have a deck list on the forums if people are interested. I haven't gotten to the report, I guess, or like the gameplay stuff as of this recording. Probably not as of its release. Maybe at some point I'll put it on there, but the longer I put it off, the less I'm going to remember, which is probably a bad practice for me. But so I guess overall, I don't think it was the best deck in the tournament. I'll reiterate that, but I do think that there's something to be said about being very familiar with your deck and making kind of those little tweaks like I was talking about as you go through, especially like the big tournaments where you're playing against other high caliber players and other meta decks that you might not necessarily see in your local play group, or just when you're playing random people online or on Lackey, where people are usually just kind of testing decks and that kind of stuff. So I think that knowing your deck well, and then of course having played for many years also helps. But also, I mean, just playing a lot. I play a lot of games on, just for the content purposes throughout the year. And also, interestingly, like, I think that me watching the film, so to speak, when I'm editing my videos is actually pretty helpful for my gameplay as well, because I'm like, oh yeah, I could have done that there. Like I kind of have that built into, um, the editing process, and I think that that definitely helps. So yeah, definitely go check out some of the Type One games on my YouTube channel, on Rob M's YouTube channel, and see some of the games from nationals at the top tables there. And I think that seeing what players were playing and the kind of plays that they make is definitely beneficial if you're trying to improve your gameplay and get to those top tables at nationals.
So be familiar with your deck and potentially even watch gameplay, like recorded gameplay if it's been on stream or something. All that to just reiterate the point that John likes to say all the time: don't build your deck the night before. So don't be in Bedford, Indiana, trying to swap the defense, 2 days before the category.
That I would say is wise advice. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I saw one of your videos and you were challenged in this video by a previous national champion himself to really find a deck and make it your own and just goldfish it and goldfish it. And you ended up going back to an old faithful deck, something that you were very familiar with. So it seems like you took the challenge head on and ended up winning nationals. Did this challenge motivate you? The people want to know, especially my buddy Brian Jones. He really wants to know. Were you challenged and you just had to get out of your brother's shadow?
You know, um, don't think that had a whole lot to do with it. I think I probably would have played what I was playing regardless, but it was something. It was there. Like it was a thought that kind of went into the whole consideration of like I should probably play this deck a few more times than I have this season, and just kind of figure it out. Like there is kind of the temptation to play different decks at the bigger tournaments, and then get the element of surprise at nationals. And that did kind of work for Jeremy, because I didn't see his games at the bigger tournaments with his deck. But yeah, I think I wouldn't put too much credit there. I mean, obviously, it was a good player who I was talking with that you're referring to, and he knows his stuff. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure about the whole brother shadow thing.
Yep. So that's the wrap on the Type One deck that won nationals. Now people won't have to be upset at me if they listen to this entire podcast and we talked about Type One, but never actually talked about the winner's deck and
If
their
Widow
play.
just
So,
overshadowed everything.
yeah, I had that
I
one
mean,
epic game with Jeremy at Southeast Regional. So we'll talk about that and not talk about your deck from nationals.
well, I will say this. Just because Widow didn't win, I think the fact that there were like 5 Widow decks in the top 8 still means that it should be there should be something done about it.
Yeah, and the fact that it won teams and Type Two.
That too. Yeah, I suppose
So
that gets in there.
yeah, I think we're all okay with Widow sailing into the sunset and just having its final run be this year.
Yeah.
I think just a clean ban would be fine by me.
I mean, like how devastating would it be to just rotate out early church and persecuted church at this point? Like now that we've got the new starter decks, we don't
Bro, I
Well,
just bought
okay.
an Eternal Inheritance.
It's in Cloud of Witnesses.
Oh, it is. Oh, well, then go ahead. Go ahead. I don't have love yet, so go
I
ahead.
guess Shipwreck might kind of hurt.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, like, once the new starter decks are released, then we'll have Son of God. We've got a Foreign Wives and a Scattered, sort of. So, I mean, if we rotate out the starter decks in 1026 and Early Church and Persecuted Church, then I think that would fix most of our problems.
Yeah, I think so.
Matthew would
But
still be around,
but
but
I think you would run the risk of like turning some people off because then it makes it look like it's going to be like a rolling rotation. Like every time a couple sets come out, we drop a couple
well,
sets.
yeah,
Even though it might not be the what you're saying just because of the problem card just rotated out, but then it's also not like just to a new player. It's just this card face forward is a lot easier to explain than these sets.
yeah.
So
But plenty of other games do like just these sets kind of thing. Plus, well, I guess the other thing is that I wouldn't really want Widow to be around in Classic either. So maybe a ban or a Rata or probably a ban
no
is the
more
right
erratas, just
call.
straight bans. That's what
Yeah,
I'm here for.
I
I
think
think
that's
it's so much
probably
cleaner
yeah.
and
I mean,
it's
like
less work.
nobody's gonna play Widow anyway if that combo isn't around. So if you like errata to say, converts an evil character from a hero or converts an evil character to a hero in the special ability for the enhancement that she gets back, then like nobody's gonna play her. So
Yeah, so she'll be banned anyway,
yeah,
exiled, more
right.
more or less. All right, well, I definitely thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing about your nationals experience. And you heard it from just a couple of redemption national champs here, since I technically won a category, pulling on the coattails of Jeremy. Um, just a couple of national champs just dishing and talking about the fact that nationals was the best nationals ever until next year, where it will
True.
be as announced at nationals in Knoxville, Tennessee, with host Chris Fashman. So
Yeah,
there you
pressure's
go.
on, Chris.
Yes, it's
It,
on. The hype train starts now, Chris. We're
yeah.
going to need lots of fuel. Going to need lots of fuel.
Oh yeah.
Gabe set the pace car. You gotta keep up. So
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate being able to talk about my experience a little bit. I think that makes me feel not quite as bad for not having written the game reports yet, because people kind of get a little bit of it from this.
yep. And just the biggest point to remember, take away from this entire podcast is that the sleep in at 485 Madison Avenue North hates fat people. Okay, hates fat people. I didn't
There
even
you
tell
go.
you this when I was going through it. Did you know they charged my card like 3 or 4 times? When I was trying to
Really?
check out, they kept telling me it was declining, and I'm like, it's not, it's going through. And she was like, no, it's declining. And it says on
Oh
my
my
screen decline.
gosh.
And I'm like, you have $1,200 pending, because it was 900 when I left, but then another one randomly popped up on another account because I paid out of 2 different accounts. And the second account, she's like, it went through. And I didn't have to do anything. They ended up crediting them back, but there for a while I had like 900 pending and the 300 that was actually charged, and then the other
Yikes.
ones were pending, and I thought they would just fall off from being authorizations, but they ended up going through and having to be hard refunds back. But they did that without me having to call or fuss. But still,
That's good at least.
I mean, still to tell me that it's declining, she's like, it's declining, and I'm like, no ma'am, you
Yeah.
just charged my card. Swipe it again. Ma'am, you just charged it again. Swipe it again.
Yeah.
Ma'am, how many times do we have to do this?
There's some kind of disconnect there, where
Yes.
either the software was not showing her what she needed to see, or she just wasn't seeing what she thought she needed to see,
Yeah, well, so we'll just leave it with
or she just wanted all your money.
the sleep in hates fat people.
She
They
was
steal
like,
from them. They make them use the stairs, shower slick, the
she's
air
like, this
conditioning.
guy spent hundreds of dollars on cardboard. He can probably afford to pay for his room a few more times.
That's hilarious. All right, guys, we're going to cut it off here, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of the Threshing Floor podcast. I want to thank you all for listening and joining us for this episode. And I want to thank you all for all the kind words at Nationals, people that listen to the podcast, enjoy it, all of that reaffirmation that, wasting a bunch of money on audio gear and doing this in my spare time is actually, fun for other people, not just for myself. So definitely want to thank you guys for all the kind words at Nationals, and we can't wait to get into future episodes here. So talk to you later. Peace.